by far the most decisive victory I've ever seen from the Bills in my lifetime in a playoff game. So we'll have to go to the tape and look back over. There's always spots for improvement, but I mean that game was just masterful.
You're now listening to the Wandering Buffalo podcast with your hosts, Andrew Chang and Justin Goddard.
Bills Mafia, 1 down, 3 to go. Happy Victory Monday to you. My name is Justin. I'll be your host tonight on the Wandering Buffalo podcast. I'm flying solo tonight. My co-host Andrew was in attendance at the game, so he's probably still frozen in the stadium, just waiting to get himself out of there. But we want to make sure we got this out to you as fast as possible, so we're just going to dive right into looking at the game. You can find us on any social media by searching up the Wandering Buffalo podcast. If you're able to like, share, subscribe, tell a friend about the show, it does help us out greatly, and keep putting this content out and just keep talking Bills. So we're going to dive right into the game because I'm so excited about this game. So much to talk about and so much positive stuff to talk about. I mean, watching the game live, it's kind of hard to believe how flawless that game was. I mean, the offensive execution, the defensive execution, just all around. We've been talking a lot this year about if this team was able to put a full team effort together for 4 quarters, what that team would look like and how dominant they would be. And we saw some signs of it throughout the season, but this is the first game that really comes to mind for me where it was just all phases of the game were firing on all cylinders. I guess except kind of special teams. We'll get into that a little bit. But first I want to start with the offensive side of the ball. And we always start this area out with Josh Allen, and I kind of want to save him for the end today, and I want to start out with the offensive line, because you don't have Josh Allen having that great of a game if they're not playing well in front of him, and I think that was such a weak spot for us early in the season, and just the job they've been able to do to kind of get it turned around and get the right players in place to really keep Josh Allen clean. It's really showing up in a big way towards the end of the season here. And it's not just in the passing game. The running game, as the offensive line got better, Singletary started getting the bulk of the carries, and the running game has become a legitimate threat. What I liked most about this game, 0 sacks for Josh Allen. The offensive line gave up 6 pressures total against a Patriots defense that features among other names, but Matthew Judon, who's going into the game, we have analysts, and I talked about him myself of just what a game wrecker Judon can be if you let him be. And they got after Josh a little bit, but for the most part he had clean pockets. He had time to work back there and was really able to be effective because of that. Some of the running game, as I mentioned before, heavy dose of Singletary, and kind of in combination with the Josh Allen runs, a little bit of Isaiah McKenzie. I mean, this team ran for 176 yards if you take out the kneel downs at the end of the game. And I mean, how fun is that to be having your backup quarterback come in and kill the clock taking knees in a playoff game? It's wild. But between Singletary, Isaiah McKenzie, Josh Allen, we're talking a total of 176 yards. I believe it was on 26 carries. They averaged just under 7 yards per carry. And this is something that we've also been talking about all season, not necessarily wanting to see heavier doses of the run game, but as you're using the run game, having it be more efficient, more effective, not just, kind of forcing your head into the wall, hoping that you're keeping the defense honest. It's truly doing its job at this point. Dawson Knox, what can we say about Dawson Knox? Just another monster game for him. And my guy Dawson's about to get a payday, and we're going to have to figure out how we move the salary cap around. As an organization, we've been looking for that impact type weapon at tight end for so long. And, Dawson Knox was somebody that was really kind of a hot button topic this year. Do we give up on him? Do we trade for Ertz? All these conversations that were happening, and he just came out this year and he's gotten better with the drops. He's become more impactful in the passing game, just finding more touches, more targets, and really doing a lot with them. And I'll tell you what, that the first Josh Allen touchdown to him, I was watching the game, and Josh Allen did say after the game that, he was intending on throwing that ball away, and basically an accident touchdown. But for Dawson Knox to be able to go up and pull down a ball that Josh Allen was intending to throw away is just kind of ridiculous how that play worked out. And I think that chemistry just kind of continues throughout the season, but also throughout that game. 5 targets, 5 receptions, 89 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That's a really good stat line for Dawson Knox. And then, we were able to get a lot of pieces involved in the pass game, and, not everybody had huge impacts, but just the idea of being able to spread the ball around, like Josh was able to do, was just really nice to see. You had Diggs getting in 3 catches, 60 yards on 4 targets. McKenzie 3 for 3 for 45 yards. Gabe Davis 2 receptions on 3 targets, 41 yards and a touchdown. Emmanuel Sanders 2 for 3 for 36. He also adds a touchdown. Tommy Doyle got in on there. We had a big man touchdown in the playoff game. I mean, there was also Singletary and Beasley. I mean, all these players got involved. I think Reggie Gilliam even got in on the action. So it was really great to see, if the defense was taking away something on a play, that the next guy was stepping up, and Josh was able to go through his reads and find all different kinds of targets. It wasn't just, hammering the same players over and over. So that's something that we've seen be a little bit sporadic, I think, through the season, and for it to come through in a big way today of just being able to take what the defense was giving us, it really showed up, and that brings me to Josh Allen and just the masterpiece of a day he had, really. You're talking 21 of 25, 308 yards, 5 touchdowns, 5. No interceptions, no sacks, and a passer rating of 157.6, which I believe the best you can do is 158.3. So, I mean, you're talking a damn near perfect game from the quarterback. Oh, and he also added 6 runs for 66 yards. So, I mean, 15 yards off of Singletary with 10 less carries. So the two of them working together in the run game, just the plays that he was able to make from the pocket, rolling out of the pocket with his feet. I mean, this is the good version of Josh Allen, and he has his highs and lows a little bit from game to game here and there. But when we see this version of Josh Allen, I don't see anybody in the league that's better than him if you got this on a week-to-week basis. And even when he has the little bit of peaks and valleys, I mean, knowing that this is kind of his ceiling and this is the direction that he's trending, it just makes me so excited for for what the team looks like now and what the team looks like going forward. If we get this full game performance from the offense and defense, I don't see many teams in the league that are really even hanging with us. So very exciting to see that. And really on the offensive side of the ball, there's really not much I can think of as far as negative plays. We're recording this, right after the game, and haven't really been able to go through and rewatch the game and kind of see some different talking points to that regard. Also riding pretty high right now. By far the most decisive victory I've ever seen from the Bills in my lifetime in a playoff game. So we'll have to go to the tape and look back over. There's always spots for improvement, but I mean that game was just masterful. No punts, no fourth downs. Just so many times that the Bills were able to move the chain on first and second down plays, so you weren't even getting into like third and long situations where the defense can really pin their ears back and know what you're doing. With how many conversions they were having on first and second down, it really was able to keep the whole playbook open on any given down and really keep things moving that way. So overall, just an A+ job from the offense. And we're going to take a quick break right now. Stick around. We'll come back with the defensive side of the ball, and we'll touch on some special teams. All right, welcome back in, and thank you again for joining us on today's episode of the Wandering Buffalo podcast, a show on the Built-in Buffalo Network. We're going to jump back in, and we're going to talk about the defense against this Patriots team. And honestly, as much fun as it was to watch the offense, seeing the caliber that this defense has been playing over the course of the full year is really where I'm kind of the most excited about this team. And it's not that, the offensive production isn't, the super fun, sexy part of the game to watch. But going back to last year, we kind of knew who this offense was. We kind of knew that with Josh Allen and the weapons that he had, despite some of the highs and lows of the season, that they were at some point going to get it clicking together and hopefully be able to maintain that. And I think the bigger question going into this year was the defense. And, would we see the defense of 2 years ago, or would we see last year's defense? And there wasn't, as much as there was changes with draft picks and whatnot, there wasn't really like wholesale changes to the personnel that we had last year. It was kind of just time on task and adding some pieces and just working together better as a unit. And granted, we haven't seen any real top flight quarterbacks for the most part since the Trey White injury. But the ability for the team to rally around that, and the secondary in particular really looking like they haven't missed a beat without Trey there, is just so impressive to me. I'm definitely a huge Trey White fan, and it's not that, when he went down with the injury, I thought the wheels were coming off, the season was over and whatnot. But I definitely thought there was going to be more of an adjustment, more variance into the defense without him there. And to the credit of the secondary, Levi Wallace and Dane Jackson in particular, they've really been able to step up and continue that very high-level defense, maintain the number one passing defense in the league. And like I said, with the addition of Taron Johnson, who's been more quietly playing out of his skin this year, I think we look at him last year and his game-changing pick sixes, and it's easy to kind of forget about him at times this year. But I think he's done such a underrated job this year, in my opinion. I think he's been stellar, And, it's the type of player that, you're either hearing their name because they made a great play or they didn't make a play. And you don't hear his name all that often. And I think it's just because he's doing such a great job of covering his receivers. Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, another great game for both of them. That the Micah Hyde interception, 100% I thought that was a touchdown. It looked like a beautiful pass right over the shoulder. And then just right at the last second, Micah Hyde swoops in and just steals that ball right away. That was one of the prettiest interceptions I've ever seen. Levi Wallace coming down with the interception on the little tip drill. And then the linebackers, Tremaine Edmonds, who is somebody that, if you listen to the show, I'm a little bit up and down on Tremaine Edmonds. I think it's a little bit unfair, but there are like the built-in expectations for me due to his draft stock and having a contract coming up. I think he's overall a pretty good player, but with his credentials coming into the team, I always expect a little bit more. But I thought Edmonds had a good game. I thought Milano had a good game, and then our defensive line stepping up. Able to get Mac Jones down 3 times. But there was other pressures too. And it's something that we've seen kind of like the run game on the offensive side of the ball. As we've been moving through these last few weeks of the season, the pass rushes seem to come alive a little bit again. We got Boogie Basham coming in on the stat sheet with a sack. Star Lotulelei had a really nice one. And then Jerry Hughes coming in with a sack too. And Jerry Hughes is somebody that I've talked about fairly recently and just not exactly having the same production that we're used to seeing from Jerry Hughes. He's still getting after the pass rusher. He's still applying pressure. But Jerry Hughes is usually, at least every 2-3 games good for a pretty wild sack or a strip sack. Something like that, and we haven't seen that a ton from him this year. But as I see that Jerry Hughes sack during this game, I start thinking back to the player that he's become in the last couple of years of the playoffs. And to me, he certainly seems like he really comes alive in the playoffs and becomes this whole different player. And I think that's great to have on this team, that veteran leadership. Some of these young guys. I thought Ed Oliver had a great game again. He's one that doesn't really pop off the stat sheet all the time, but he's really found himself in particular, like the second half of the season, and I think he's been pretty consistently playing out of his mind. And then definitely want to mention Harrison Phillips. Also not a guy that pops off the stat sheet, but he's somebody that really had a tough start to his career in Buffalo, be it injuries, missing an off season. There's a lot of curveballs in his career early, and it was starting to look like whether it was the injuries or who he was as a player or a combination of both. He was, to me, starting to look like we might have missed on that draft pick. And boy, he's been showing up in a big way, in particular over like the last 4 or 5 weeks. And to the point where I think he's kind of outplaying Star Lotulelei. And as I say that, Star Lotulelei comes away with the sack this year. So I guess it's kind of a good problem to have that the Bills they've really been investing in the trenches and the defensive line in particular, wanting to have guys that have some possession flexibility and being able to rotate people in and out of the game so everybody's still staying fresh. And I would say a bit earlier in the year, I would say it was looking like a little bit of mixed results for me. But towards the end of the season, as the pass rush has kind of been coming alive again, I think that's really showing up. The one thing I did want to mention, and I got to give props to my guy Andrew for talking about this in the preview show. As we were doing the team breakdowns, and he was comparing the Bills' fourth down defense versus the Patriots' fourth down offense, and how much success the Patriots have on fourth down. They did go 4 for 4 on fourth down. That's a mouthful. They converted 4 of 4 fourth downs in this game, and it's kind of hard to poke too many holes into what the defense did. I mean, this wasn't the Jets team we were playing the week before, where you held them to almost nothing. You know, this is a playoff caliber Patriots team. I think they're still pretty early in the process, but you know, their offense has been strong enough. Mac Jones has been strong enough to get them to this point. And really, at the end of the day, through the first half, you pretty much stopped them from doing anything that they wanted to do. And then you get into the second half of the game. Yeah, they end up with 17 points total. But you're also going into, you know, more of a defensive game plan of, okay, well, let's make sure that we're really not allowing the big play. So I think the offense came alive a little bit in part to that. But even at that rate, you're still talking 232 yards from Mac Jones on 24 attempts, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. The big one for me is seeing what the Patriots were able to do in the run game the first go around, and then looking at this game, cold weather game, expecting them to try to commit to the run. You held Damian Harris to 30 yards on 9 carries. Ramondre Stevenson had 27 yards on 8 carries. So, you know, the strategy of getting out to an early lead and trying to make them one-dimensional and dare Mac Jones to beat you, it was really able to be put into action by the Bills jumping off to an early lead and kind of get them away from their run game, and they were very effective in stopping the run when it did happen. I do think there was some plays left out there on the Patriots' part where you saw receivers that were coming open, and it was kind of the daring Mac Jones to go through his reads and find those receivers and be able to make all those throws. And personally, I think that was part of the defensive strategy was knowing that some of those things might pop up. But doing the daring Mac Jones to beat you part of it. And there were a few throws from him where he had a receiver running open and kind of duffs the ball into the ground and just a little bit of accuracy issues. Like I said, the defense was able to pressure him. They were able to cover on the back end. They were able to, you know, throw some different looks at him to make him question what he was seeing. And the last thing I really want to talk about on the defensive side of the ball is actually more of a commentary on what the Patriots were trying to pull out here. When they went to the fake spike, and that one to me was kind of just like, there's some plays where, you know, I'm just a dumb Bills football fan who does a podcast, but as I'm sitting here, I believe they still had 2 timeouts left, and I'm watching the game, and I see Mac Jones calling for the spike, and I'm like, I don't think they're going to spike the ball here. They still have 2 timeouts. Like, why would you let all this time run off the clock to waste it down spiking it when you have timeouts? And, you know, sure enough, it did look like it fooled part of the Bills' defense, but I believe that was Hughes just ripping right off the edge. He didn't even hesitate on that one. That was just a veteran play, and he wasn't stumped for a second. He knew exactly where they were going with that. And then moving into the special teams, really the only, I guess, blemish on the night for the Bills And I don't really want to look too far into it because Tyler Bass has been so reliable during the year. But going into this Patriots game, he hadn't missed a PAT the entire season. And then in this game, he goes 5 of 7, so he missed 2 PATs. Maybe I chalk it up a little bit to playoff nerves. I don't know exactly where to place this. I will say I still have full confidence in Tyler Bass, but it is something to keep an eye on going forward. Most of these playoff games that we're playing aren't going to be 47-17 by the end of the game. So I think the announcers were even talking about it as they were calling the game, and the first PAT that he missed would have put us up. I believe it was 21-0 or 21-3, and keep this in mind. If the game gets a little bit close, that could be a big factor. And obviously, in this game, it didn't become a factor. The game was pretty well in hand for the better part of the game, but that is something. Moving into the next round of the playoffs, that it might not be a PAT. It might be, we drive down the field before halftime and we set up, a 45-yard field goal to extend our lead or close a gap. And, it's kind of going to be where's the confidence level at? And is that a kick that Bass is going to come through on? And like I said, this kicking performance didn't really make me falter at all. He's been excellent through 2 seasons now. So I'm just going to consider this one, maybe his hammies were a little tight from the cold. Who knows, but I think he'll be okay going forward. As far as punting goes, we did the best strategy possible. Keep Matt Hawk right on the sideline. Don't let him punt. That was great to see a game where there was no punting, considering the game that we saw the previous week with the Jets and what a mess the punting was that game. So I'm all for that strategy going forward. As far as returning goes, Isaiah McKenzie, Micah Hyde, no mistakes made there, and I've said it on this podcast before. And my feelings really haven't changed. I'm not a fan of Micah Hyde being back there to return punts. He's such an important part to what the defense does. I just don't want him, taking an unnecessary hit or, somebody getting blocked into him as he's fair catching. Any of those things that can happen. With all that being said, throughout this playoff run, as far as we can take it, I'm all for Micah Hyde being back there. I like the security he gives us, and I don't even really need him to be returning the ball, which he did a pretty good job of. He had 2 returns for 54 yards. I don't even need all that. I like him being back there to just secure the ball and make sure that it's going back to the offense. Definitely something I'd like to look at in this coming off season of getting somebody whose more primary function is to return punts. But throughout the rest of this year, I'm all for Micah Hyde staying back there. So the Bills will be moving into the second round of the playoffs. At this moment, it's still to be determined on who the matchup will be. So this is going to be decided by the Sunday night game between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Kansas City Chiefs. So if the Steelers are able to pull off that upset, we would be hosting another playoff game against the Cincinnati Bengals. And if the Chiefs win that game, we're going to be taking the show on the road to Arrowhead. Kind of mixed feelings on what matchup I'd rather draw here. And honestly, with the performance that we just had, there's neither team that really, I guess, scares me. I think the fact that we played the Chiefs earlier in the season and were able to take them down I guess it doesn't give me a ton of confidence there because when we caught the Chiefs earlier in the season, they weren't the same team that they are right now. That being said, I still don't think that they're the same team that they were this time last year, but they were really able to put together a solid campaign to end the season and really find their groove. And the Cincinnati Bengals they're a very interesting team to me right now. I think it's kind of the real deal with Cincinnati, and we saw them for so many years getting to the playoffs with Andy Dalton, and it was kind of backing into the playoffs and not always very great teams, and they had some weapons, but the quarterback was on the high end of average. And I think the only thing really working against the Bengals right now is playoff experience, and I think that does show up as you get further into the postseason, especially Burrow still being, a young quarterback, a defense like the Bills presenting different challenges than, a Raiders defense, and being able to throw some things at Burrow that he might not have seen. Either way, I'm feeling pretty good about whatever team we have coming up next, and like I said, if we have that full team performance like we just had against the Patriots, there's not many teams left in the league that I think can really hang with us. So that's going to do it for tonight's show. Thank you for joining us. Again, this is the Wandering Buffalo podcast on the Built-in Buffalo Network. You can reach out to us if you want to get involved with the show, if you want to talk some Bills football. We're always looking for guests on the show. If you want to hit us up, my co-host Andrew, you can find him on most social media at 2changs, and you can find me on any social media by looking up jgods22. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, comment, tell a friend about the podcast. Help us keep this thing going. We appreciate all the support. We will see you on Thursday as we get into the nuts and bolts previewing either the Bengals or the Chiefs, whatever team we're looking at next. So until next time, go Bills.